microphone. So first off, I want to thank you all for coming. As Carol said, this is a great turnout. It should be a great program. So welcome. I also want to thank the co-sponsors of this event, Cleveland Heights Landmark Commission, and of course the Cleveland Heights University Heights Public Library, who are hosting us this evening. So Carol told you about everything that's coming up. If you want more details on the events, you can go to the library's website, you can go to our Facebook page or website. And on your way out, if you want to grab a view from the overlook, we have some of the recent issues there. That's our, I guess you could call it our quarterly newsletter. There you go. And if you become a member of the Historical Society, you get that mailed to you at your home whenever it comes out. So if you want more information about joining the Historical Society, you can come talk to me later or check out our website. To begin, on Independence Day in 1886, thousands of people in Cleveland celebrated the nation's birthday by attending an event in the Heights that promised to feature large explosions and deafening blasts. But this was no fireworks display. Instead, a crowd of 5,000 had come to the Dome Gorge that afternoon to see the old Shaker grist mill be blown up by dynamite. The 5-story stone mill had been built by the Shaker Religious Society in the 1840s in the gorge, located between what is today North Park Boulevard and Fair Hill Road, west of Coventry. By the 1880s, however, the Shaker community was in decline. Cleveland City Councilman Charles Reeder purchased the land the mill sat atop and planned to quarry the stone in the riverbed once the mill was demolished. So, as Apu Nahasapima Petalon, you might know him as the owner of the Quickie Mart on The Simpsons, once remarked to Homer Simpson as he stocked up on fireworks, "What can be a better way to celebrate the birth of our nation than to blow up a small piece of it?" And this is what Charles Reeder did on Independence Day, 1886. As the Plain Dealer reported the next day, several explosions occurred in rapid succession, and the mill raised up, the whole structure collapsed, and with a loud roaring sound, sunk into a shapeless mass, so that all that could be seen was a heap of rock and mortar. A loud cheer went up from the crowd as the building fell. So today, it'd be hard to imagine a similar scene taking place in the Heights. Indeed, the destruction of a historic structure would now be more likely to draw angry protests than cheering crowds. Recently, the demolition of a house in Cleveland Heights' historic Chestnut Hills neighborhood drew the ire of those who wished to see the house, designed by Walker and Weeks in 1911, restored rather than razed. And this year, a plan to tear down a parish house on Fairmount Boulevard garnered protests as well. Even the millstone from the old Shaker grist mill, so gleefully blown up in the 1880s, was later recovered and lovingly placed in Shaker Square in 1947, surrounded by well-manicured shrubs and affixed with a stately plaque describing its history and significance. So why have attitudes towards preservation changed so dramatically over the years? What powers do local governments and concerned citizens have to preserve the historic places that they deem to be important to their communities? And how can we balance the property rights of home and business owners with the right of community members to preserve the historic character of their neighborhoods? These are some of the questions that will be addressed this evening by our panel of speakers. So I'll just tell you how we're going to do this tonight. I'm going to introduce all three members of our panel. They're going to make a short statement. Then I'm going to ask them some questions, and we'll kind of have a conversation. And then we're going to take questions from the audience. So, without further ado, Chuck Miller is a graduate of Kent State University School of Architecture and has extensive experience with projects using innovative building technology and adaptive reuse of older buildings. He's dedicated to the research and development of new construction methods addressing durability, sustainability, renewable energy, and enduring beauty. His firm, Doty & Miller Architects, has its post office in Bedford, Ohio, in the former 1934 Bedford Post Office, and it is the first freestanding architect's office in the U.S. to earn LEED Gold certification. Mr. Miller is also the chair of the Cleveland Heights Landmark Commission. Ken Goldberg, to his left, is president of the Cleveland Heights Historical Society and has been a trustee since 1996. Mr. Goldberg serves on the Cleveland Heights Landmark Commission, spent many years as a member of the Cleveland Heights Improvement Awards Committee, and was on the Cleveland Heights Citizens Involvement Committee. He is a former president of the Western Reserve Architectural Historians and was principal editor of AIA Cleveland's Guide to Cleveland Architecture. He's also been active on AIA Cleveland's Historic Resource Committee, and has been on the CRS AIA Celebration of Preservation Awards jury. Mr. Goldberg is a professional librarian who for 30 years was responsible for the Information Resource Center for the Northeast Ohio Area-Wide Coordinating Agency. He holds an MA in Art History from Binghamton University and an MLS degree from Syracuse University. And lastly, Marion Morton is Professor Emeritus of History at John Carroll University. She received her BA in Classics from Smith College and her PhD in American Studies from Case Western University. She is the author of several books on the history of Cleveland and Cleveland Heights, including Cleveland Heights, The Making of an Urban Suburb, and Sin No More, Social Policy and Unwed Mothers in Cleveland, 1855 to 1990, and Women in Cleveland, an Illustrated History. So welcome to our 3 panel members for tonight's talk. And I would invite the first of you to make your statement.
Thanks, Michael. I was asked to start my discussion tonight with the challenges that an architect has in working with people who own older properties and how to help maintain them. I meet every week with people who want to either repair, restore, reuse, or somehow reinvest in their older properties. Some of these properties are really architectural gems. Some are nice but of modest character, and some are downright ugly. So I see everything. The difficulties faced with older properties usually falls for me into 4 major categories of challenges that people find with older buildings. And so these are the 4. Durability. Durability goes to the issues of maintenance and so how long the materials are going to last. When we don't repair roofs, water gets into buildings, gets into roof structures, gets into ceilings. It's an ongoing process of further and further deterioration. So a lot of what I have to deal with depends on the degree of durability or deterioration that we've got in a building, and trying to get people to understand that maintaining a building is much simpler and easier than waiting for damage and having to repair it. Flexibility is another issue. People live in homes that were built 75 years ago when everybody lived in little small rooms and had very few closet spaces, and they would like to open them all up. They see these great rooms and these big open spaces in new apartments and so forth, and they want to turn their house into that, and very often the way the house is structured makes it possible but very expensive to do. So that's one of the problems we have a challenge with. Affordability has to do with what does it cost to maintain, heat, cool, and pretty much live in that house. What is it going to cost you to live there? And last is what I call lovability, because nobody loves an ugly building. And people will walk away from them. So in those 4 categories, I find if buildings fail in any one of those 4, it can be enough for people to abandon a property. So we keep going back to that as we analyze projects that we're working on. And to tell you the truth, is one of the things we think about when we design new buildings. We want them to be durable, flexible, affordable, and beautiful, so that they will last a longer time into the future. What is our greatest threat, I guess, to me, to preservation in Cleveland Heights? To me, it's not really the big landmarks that we are all aware of. I think those have varying degrees of durability to them. But I think it has to do with the more moderately priced homes and properties that were built before the Second World War. It's really entire neighborhoods and streets of the sort of middle life homes that we have that really define our neighborhoods. And I know for years you read about this from books in the 1950s and so forth about Cleveland Heights, and everybody is taken by the architectural character of every single street and neighborhood. And I think that everybody here knows that some streets and neighborhoods today you can see used to be nice, but have really deteriorated quite a bit. So to me, the biggest challenge happens to be that when an entire neighborhood or entire street reaches a certain tipping point, it becomes very difficult to get people to come into a neighborhood and revitalize one or two properties at a time, because it's really an uphill battle. And so I believe that the only way we can combat that is to have some sort of a larger scale reinvestment of some kind that will re-tip the scale back in neighborhoods and streets, so that we don't really lose them to the ongoing neglect that tends to happen. And the struggle we've got is that real estate developers are not really interested in those neighborhoods. The people who make the big investments, who built those homes before the Second World War, are out doing something else. They love raw land, they love open spaces, they love the further out suburbs. It's a lot easier to do that, to deal with old infrastructure and sewer lines that are broken and the things that you've got to deal with in older neighborhoods. So how does this change? And again, the big developers don't have a real interest in our community values. They're for a profit, and you can't blame them because they're business people. So how do we change that? Well, I throw out some ideas about how we could possibly have something that we have on the model of the CDCs in Cleveland, the community development corporations, who have more of an interest in the community, less of an interest in profits, and will potentially own and manage properties so that they can derive some income from that. One example we have in the Cleveland area is the Cleveland Housing Network, who owns properties and maintains them and keeps them at a reasonable price for folks. They're not particularly interested in historic preservation as such. They're more interested in housing. But I think something along those lines, and partnering with local organizations like we have, like the Home Repair Resource Center, which I think is a fantastic resource, seems to me like we ought to be able to bring together some of the resources we've got in terms of making that happen. Final note I wanted to make is that the most hopeful sign I see in Cleveland Heights over the last 10 years is the fact that ordinary people in communities and neighborhoods have taken it upon themselves to get their neighborhoods on the historic district. This has not been a city program. This is something that has happened because we had citizens who were motivated enough to put all of that work together, and we have numerous historic districts. Again, that's talking about neighborhoods and streets, and I think that's a terrific thing for us to be building our historic preservation future upon. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Up next, we have Ken Goldberg.
Greater Cleveland is a metropolitan area where for decades there were less interest in historical architectural preservation than in many other regions. By the time the movement picked up in Cuyahoga County, a great deal of our better 19th century structures were already gone, and those interested in restoring or maintaining an older building have gravitated to early 20th century structures. As such, Cleveland Heights for several decades has been integral to the preservation movement in Cuyahoga County. What makes Cleveland Heights distinctive? It doesn't need trite monikers like City of Homes, Tree City, or the Friendly City. Its physical attributes are not terribly unusual. Every community in Cuyahoga County can boast some attractive areas. But Cleveland Heights is a community with a great deal of architectural distinction, particularly regarding residential and ecclesiastic, with a large number of terrific examples of residential architecture ranging from the turn of the 20th century to past World War II. Of suburbs in Cuyahoga County, only Lakewood's built environment, averaging approximately a decade older, can possibly compete in architectural variety and quality. Our fabulous neighbor, Shaker Heights, was the largest planned community in the United States in its earlier years. As picturesque and extraordinary as much of its residential architecture may be, its extreme case of design restrictions made it almost impossible for the construction of many styles in the forefront of American residential architecture to even be contemplated in the Van Swearingen-controlled neighborhoods. Although its design restrictions became amazingly, though temporarily, liberal in the 1960s, Shaker Heights is missing worthy examples of Queen Anne, Colonial Revival, arts and crafts or craftsmen, bungalows, Prairie School, Mediterranean, Spanish, Pueblo, front porch four squares, modern, Art Deco, and international style, all of which we have great examples in Cleveland Heights. Shaker Heights also lacks grand apartment districts dating from before 1930. as well as glorious houses of worship that are not Georgian revival, with the exception of First Baptist. Contemporary trends have been accepted in Cleveland Heights neighborhood since the 1910s. Clearly, one reason is that Cleveland Heights has a distinction of adjoining University Circle, and some of Cleveland Heights' neighborhoods enjoy a true college town environment. Strong connections with the Cleveland Institute of Art, CWRU's former College of Architecture, and the region's academic community in general have given Cleveland Heights a definite flavor, extremely evident in some of its neighborhoods and commercial districts. This has long been a community that has kept up with residential architectural trends. With the Great Recession, there has been an epidemic of houses lost all over greater Cleveland. However, Cleveland Heights, like Cleveland and many older suburbs, has already lost a significant segment of its 20th century architecture, including about 10 very noteworthy mansions. In the 1960s, virtually nothing in Cleveland Heights was valued as historic or of special architectural merit to be worth anyone's trying to save. Whole blocks went for an institutional or commercial expansion. An extensive review of lost Cleveland Heights through 1997 appears as a featured story on our Cleveland Heights Historical Society website, chhistory.org. Beyond this, many residential styles are being compromised with the mass prevalence or replacements of windows and exterior doors totally disregarding the style of the house, shutters removed or shoddy versions indiscriminately and improperly added, and installation of all types of synthetic sidings and vinyl or even plastic fencing and railings currently available. Fortunately, Cleveland Heights has an active landmark commission and a very knowledgeable preservationist, Kara O'Donnell, and there are many useful heritage and help loans available out there. The Cleveland Restoration Society and several other organizations are more than willing to work with property owners to keep up and improve their buildings in appropriate fashion. But without certified local government or a CLG designation for Cleveland Heights, our efforts are indeed limited. Meanwhile, where does Cleveland Heights fit into a regional perspective? New residential or commercial development in Cleveland Heights may or may not enhance downtown Cleveland, but it surely will reduce the number of residents, businesses, or offices that would otherwise be located further out and contribute to our sprawl issues. In many metropolitan areas, the types of neighborhoods that comprise Cleveland Heights would indeed be located in the center city. Mergers of services between municipalities potentially increase financial efficiency and responsibility, and a complete merger of cities, such as Cleveland Heights with University Heights, is a concept which should be thoroughly explored for mutual benefit. Meanwhile, where does Cleveland Heights fit into a regional perspective? New residential or commercial development in Cleveland Heights, said that already. Perhaps this community might find means to take further advantage of Cleveland Heights' strategic location and determine how to get public transportation between the Heights and downtown Cleveland, at least to the level it was for many decades. What can be done to involve the public when demolition is threatened, such that the chance of a fine building being saved and renovated might be greater? In this age of ever new synthetic materials being used in construction, how do we encourage maintaining with integrity a housing stock that will be composed primarily of century homes by 2030?
That was Ken Goldberg, and lastly, Marion Morton.
I didn't know I was going to stand up. As I said, usually historic preservation is about the preservation of buildings of historic or architectural significance. And really, I thought that's what we were going to be talking about tonight, but to my delight, the conversation has taken a slightly different bent. Cleveland Heights has lots and lots of wonderful buildings of great significance. For example, the Rockefeller Building or the Christian Science Church, which is now in Nottinghamsburg. We have, 11 historic national districts in Cleveland Heights. And while I appreciate and admire those homes and districts of great historic and architectural significance, I want to make one point, which actually both the other speakers have made, which is very simply this, that every home, every building in Cleveland Heights has great significance, not simply for its owners, but for the neighborhoods in which they are. So all of our homes, all of our commercial and religious structures are important. It's important to save or preserve all of them. It's especially important because, like cities around the country, Cleveland Heights was hit hard by the housing crisis. A crisis that for us was compounded by two things: aging housing structure and an aging population. Not a good combination. Fortunately, Cleveland Heights has two agencies with decades of experience at addressing housing problems. Those two agencies are the city's Housing Preservation Office, HPO, and the private agency that Chuck has already mentioned, Home Repair Resource Center, HRRC. The city's Housing Preservation Office, most of us know this office. These are the folks who come around every 5 years or so and point out that your gutters are falling off and that the paint is peeling. We recognize them when they come around. And then when you go to sell your house, of course, they come and tell you many other things that are wrong with your house. Maybe you didn't know. They do specialize in inspections. That's what the HPO does best. Last year, the HPO did a total of 18,157 housing inspections. So they earn their money. Most of us, however, know less about the other programs that Housing Preservation Office provides. For example, a paint program that provides grants for senior homeowners, a program that painted 23 homes in 2013, a violation repair program, also for seniors, that provides advice from specialists on how to get somebody to fix your home, and that is difficult, as all of us know, and also a small grant to go along with that. All these grants and loans, by the way, are means tested. HP also runs a program called Let's Save Cuyahoga. Rick Wagner describes this as, this is big, Rick says, and if you know Rick, you know, it resonates. This is big, this Let's Save Cuyahoga. It is funded by the county, and it provides assistance from a lead removal specialist for low moderate income families or families with children under the age of 6. It provides specialized advice and also provides a loan, again, means tested. It provides a variety of loans, actually, a deferred loan program using home funds that Ken already mentioned, for total home rehab, funds from the county, and a short-term loan program that addresses major repairs. HP also provides a nuisance abatement coordinator, a very important job in the context of our hundreds of foreclosed properties. The coordinator keeps track of vacant properties, and the city maintains them. Yeah, and charges the owners, by the way, it's not free. The city provides yard cleanups, grass cutting, emergency board ups, and so forth. The money is reclaimed by putting a lien on the property. So it's not, it does come back to the city, at least in theory. Working very closely with the Housing Preservation Office is the Home Repair Resource Center, a private agency created in 1971 by members of Forest Hill Church Presbyterian. HRRC's goal has always been to keep Cleveland Heights in good repair, and the strategies it employs are several. Like HPO, HRRC provides loans and grants for home repairs to those who qualify for them. They're means tested. HRRC provides special assistance to homeowners age 62 over, for example, again, getting help with a contractor, and those of you who've ever tried to get a contractor know how difficult that can be. What is really unique about HRC is that it empowers homeowners to do their own repairs through their tool rental program and their home repair classes. They also have a resource library, which helps homeowners like us find a person to do the job if we can't do it ourselves. Also unique about HRC is that it provides counseling and financial workshops and one-on-one counseling to help people with financial issues such as mortgages and foreclosures. HRC is the only HUD-approved counseling agency in this area. A subsidiary of HRC, Homes in the Heights, has brought vacant foreclosed properties and transformed them into like-new homes on Westover, Addison, and Berkeley roads that are assets to their neighborhoods. You may have seen some of those really nice rehabs that HRC has done. As an historian, I appreciate preservation of homes in districts of great architectural and historic significance. As a Clevelandite resident, I can't stress enough how important it is to preserve not just these, but everyone's home with the help of HPO and HRC. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. So next we're going to move on to more of our discussion part of the program, where I'm going to ask some questions. I should say we sent out an email about a month ago asking the community for questions they had about preservation in Cleveland Heights. So the questions I'm going to be asking are some of the questions that we got in return. And after that, like I said, we'll open it up to questions from you guys. These are open to anybody. I have a wireless mic here if you want to use that. It's no longer on mute, so whoever wants it. First, so you can't really drive around Cleveland Heights without noticing those really nice looking black and gold signs that let you know that you've just entered a landmark district that's been listed on the National Register of Historic Places. I think we just heard from Marion that there are 11 of those historic districts that are listed on the National Register, which I believe is the most of any city in Ohio, except for the big ones like Cincinnati, Columbus, Cleveland. So, since we have all these historic districts on the National Register, aren't we good? Should this take care of all our preservation worries? Chuck, you mentioned the fact that you're worried about our neighborhoods, these individual houses. So what is being listed on the National Register of Historic Places mean for a neighborhood, and what are the limitations to that?
Well, it's interesting. We have hearings, public hearings every time we get to the point of wanting to put a district on the National Register. And that question gets brought up every time we have a public meeting about it. What it comes down to is the fact that it really has no power in terms of limitation as to what people can do there. It's really an honorarium in terms of a designation. It's great for the community, it's great for a neighborhood to gain that recognition. It means something to have so many historic districts. In order to get that historic designation, you've really got to prepare a lot of detailed information and submit it so that it can be approved, and often that submittal requires a lot of additional clarification and resubmittal and so forth. But when it comes down to the end, unless you're doing a project of some kind that has federal money associated with it, there are no limitations on what people can do there. So it only helps us in a certain way. I mean, if people want to tear down houses and all those kinds of things in those neighborhoods, that designation doesn't prevent it. That's a reason that we kind of need local legislation to help us in terms of that. So It's really, to be honest with you, it's nothing more than a great honor to have a district become that and to be able to promote that designation and recognition to people that are around there. We would hope to be able to build upon it in terms of people rehabbing homes. I met with a guy last weekend whose home is in a historic district, and he's doing a tremendous job of doing some restoration work. And I would hope that all of his neighbors notice it, and he's proud to be in a historic district. He mentioned that to me, so it means something to him, it means something to the people that are there. But in terms of limitations, there really aren't any.
Well, as Chuck said about the limitations, people who really are familiar with this type of thing, I mean, people from other cities are aware of that also, and they might be attracted when they come to Cleveland to a neighborhood that they're told it's in a historic district, as long as they're not worried about what they might want to do with their property. There's a good example of the difference between a local district and a historic district. Mount Zion Congregational Church in Magnolia in East 108th was planning to tear down its wonderful, marvelous office building, which was a mansion kind of Flemish style, and the house next door, the Pilgrim House, and it was only in the Magnolia Wade Park Historic District, which was in the National Register, but now it's a city district, and it became a city district just in time, so they couldn't just go right ahead and tear down those two buildings. In fact, the last I heard, they're going to restore those two buildings. But there's an example where a local Cleveland district does have more moxie to it. There are some people probably, when they're looking for a house, would like to know that it's in the National District. Also, as Chuck sort of hinted about, if you're in one of those districts, it's a very good source of information when you want to find out about a house. At least you get some very basic information. If you think it's wrong, then you can change it.
I think it adds a certain cachet to the neighborhood, but it imposes absolutely no restrictions whatsoever, whether that's good or bad.
Well, the signs are very nice, so we like that.
We like the sign. And we're still missing one sign I want to point out, Euclid Heights. It still does not have a sign, but if you live in that neighborhood, you're in a district, you just don't know it yet. We'll know it next year, I think.
Okay, so then I guess the next question is, how do we, if we're interested in preservation, how do we put some teeth or give some strength to the laws in Cleveland Heights to make it more likely that we are able to preserve these historic structures that we all care about? I know, Ken, you mentioned certified local government. Somebody else mentioned a demolition ordinance. Could any of you go into more detail about maybe what those are, why they haven't been passed yet, and what's the likelihood of those coming through in the future?
I just noticed since I was on the Landmark Commission the first time the topic came up, and apparently there were people in the city government who were against it, and it just never materialized. I mean, there were people in city council. They need, I have information here on certified local governments. It's a state program that has federal funding filtered through the state, and we have much of the criteria needed. We have a Landmark Commission, we have 5 more people, different things. We need ordinances to really establish this, and we haven't had enough interest, I would say, on the city level to go ahead with it. But if we ever do, it enables us to establish local historic districts and have more to say when there's demolition and threatened, and more public meetings and things like that. We have, I think, was it 6 communities in this county that have that designation. Berea, Cleveland, Lakewood, Euclid, Olmsted Falls, Parma, and Shaker Heights, and they get funds to do certain projects.
So let me expand on what I believe has been the tripping point in terms of government supporting this or not. As Ken said, it's in a lot of communities. It's in Lakewood, it's in a lot of other communities in the surrounding area. And they don't seem to have a problem with it, but the fear that I have heard, the feedback I have gotten, is that some people in government don't want to do the one thing that is required to get a certified local government designation is you must have local legislation that defines certain regulations and rules regarding historic preservation, and they must have teeth. There must be some sort of fine imposed or something like that. There must be a penalty associated with it so that it's really truly a law. As you may or may not know, we designate landmarks here in Cleveland Heights purely voluntarily. We approach folks, and sometimes they approach us about a property getting a landmark designation. We ask them when they make an alteration or change windows or want to do something to alter the building or put an addition on, we ask them to come and show that to us, and we give recommendations, and we hope that what we try to do is give them a helping hand. But the little known fact is that if they decide not to do that and want to do something on their own, we don't have any power over it. We can't force them to do anything. The only body in the Cleveland design area that has the force of that is the Architecture Review Board. Now, if they say that they do or do not approve a certain feature and it doesn't get built that way, then there are penalties associated with that. But that does not expand to the Landmark Commission. The way we've dealt with that in the past is that we meet often on landmarked properties with the Architecture Review Board as a team, so we don't give people conflicting information, and we meet together with them. And we hope that our opinion gets imposed to some degree on the Architecture Review Board, and they will support our position very often. So that in that way it does get teeth because it becomes their regulation. But so as it stands, we don't have anything from an historic preservation standpoint that has any penalty enforcement laws of any kind. The same goes with having to do with demolition and so forth. So without those features, the state won't grant us a certified local government designation. So if we can't get over that hurdle, or don't want to get over that hurdle, it comes down to a lot of people's attitude is, hey, it's private property rights, and who are we, the city, to impose those on individual property owners? So that has become the impasse. I wouldn't say that everybody in the government feels all the same way, one side or the other. There's their own mix of opinion about it, but we haven't been able to carry the day on it yet.
When you say government, you mean Cleveland City Council, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
City Council.
I think we talked about CLG for minimally 10 years when I was on Landmark Commission. Minimally 10 years. Finally got a statute through the law department, and they got stuck at council.
Right.
I was off by then. Yeah.
Well, so if that's the case, and certified local government designation is kind of not a possibility right at the moment. And of course that might change. But for now, and I think you might have touched on this, all of you to some degree, but what can we do to encourage homeowners to restore their home, their historic home, rather than A, demolish it, or B, kind of gut it and remodel completely? I'm thinking of that home that I mentioned in Chestnut Hills, beautiful home by Walker and Weeks, who designed all the big buildings in Cleveland. And somebody bought it, and they tore it down. They built an energy-efficient green home, which is something that we tend to love in Cleveland Heights, but there was still this fact that they tore down this historic home. So how do you encourage somebody, a homeowner, to not do that and to restore their home?
Well, that's the question that comes up all the time. It's very difficult. I mean, you mentioned specifically that Walker and Weeks house. When you have a property that ends up in a new owner's hands that has been very poorly maintained for a lot of years, and there's a lot of reinvestment required on a house that, if I remember correctly, that house was 10,000 square feet, so it was really big. It was a tremendous house, and especially the older photographs prove that. But when you get to the point of really trying to make it livable again, and there was literally running water in the basement of that house, I know. There was a sale that almost went through, and then a bunch of things happened through weather, and it revealed a lot of problems that the first almost buyer backed away from. So those are the kinds of things that you struggle with. I mean, I think the bigger question is how do you maintain properties to let them not get to that point. I mean, if we can encourage people to maintain their properties and understand that if you paid $150,000 for your house and you don't take care of it, your house is going to be worth $100,000. I mean, if you want to maintain the value of your home, you've got to take care of all the things having to do with modernization and safety and wiring and appearance and all those kinds of things. You got to keep up with it. And that's just, I think, the responsibility of being a homeowner. And if you don't do that and you let it get away from you and roof leaks turn into attic cave-ins and things start to fall apart on the inside, it becomes insurmountable. And on top of it, people they asked me to, how come I've heard you did the straw house, and you did all these things to make energy efficient. Well, that involves retrofitting at a pretty expensive dollar amount as opposed to building new. So you've got to make compromises. It's just a matter of making compromises. I still prefer living in my home as poorly energy efficient as it is, because I like the character of it, and I like the fact that generations of people lived there before I did, and it just sort of, I think it has, it's like there's another person there. So you want to maintain that, and I want to be respectful of it, and I don't want to do things that are going to devalue it. I think it's I think it's actually more than anything else. It's kind of a cultural thing. I think you have to make it a value for people that want to do it. People who restore old homes are passionate about it. They love it. They know that very often they could buy a cheaper house someplace else in Solon or someplace, but they make a choice to live here and take on that task because they like the fact that a house may be built in 1930 or 1925 or 1910. Just has a lot more character and charm to it, and the details are replaceable and on and all the things that are about it. So I don't really know if there's a quick and easy answer to it. Every house is different. Every house has different situations. That's what architects and builders struggle with when we go in and look at a house and try to figure out what can we do.
I'd just like to think that people can somehow, as Chuck said, be educated in the direction where they appreciate more the older features, the original materials, and original and also authentic materials, real wood, real brass, real stone, real brick, etc. There's a lot of literature and media out there, goes in both directions. There are all kinds of remodeling magazines and remodeling books. I just looked at a Beechwood magazine the other day. They were talking about remodeling houses, and they talked about all the fine points of changing all your windows and all that. Meanwhile, we have our landmarks in Cleveland Heights. I'd like to think that, for the most part, they follow the old rules pretty much. I'd like to think they inspire some people if they know what the landmarks are. They know that in certain neighborhoods you don't see all the changes. People do have more respect for the preservation ethic, let's say. Old House Journal, pretty much is respect for it, but they've become compromising over the years. This old house certainly compromises quite a bit, depending on the situation and the owner's needs. There are magazines, there's the magazines on arts and crafts houses, and Bungalow, American Bungalow, and all these different books that really do emphasize the old features, and old catalogs available to make people realize maybe what they looked like at one time that can inspire people.
What was the question?
I
Yeah, I know what it was.
Okay.
I think you're right. We have to develop, I'm going to use Chuck's word, a culture of preservation, a sense within the city that preserving your house, whether it's a Rockefeller or not, is worthwhile. That's the function of a landmark commission. And also the function of the city housing office and HRC.
Let me just tag on a couple of more things, and I think that, Marion talked about it just briefly there for a second and reminded me I wanted to say that, it is, I don't get overbearing about it, but the fact is that in this day and age with climate change and all of that, it almost turns into a moral issue too in terms of preserving these old buildings, so we really should care about that. The other thing that I'll tell you though, that every fall when I go on the Heights housing tour that is given, that you get to see inside people's homes. I always come away from that inspired, because there's people that, and they don't always do it the way you would do it in terms of style and character, but there are so many wonderful homes that you had no idea are so wonderful, and what people have done with imagination, and a lot of effort, and a lot of money. Homes in this community are just outstanding, and so more people could just spread the word about that. I think Home Depot probably has a big surge of people buying things the weekend after that tour.
There are a lot of contractors who don't, ever share, or they just don't know what's really available. I mean, there's so much that you won't find in a place like Home Depot. You want a certain kind of wooden shutters. You want so many kinds of things. I mean, I happen to like going to places like Home Depot. They're very, very interesting, but there's so many other kinds of products available out there. They are advertised in magazines and on the web and all that. So it is possible to get a lot of the old kinds of fixtures, and many kinds of things.
Okay. Somebody wanted to know if there are any historic structures or areas in the city of Cleveland Heights that are being threatened with demolition, or that you're worried might be demolished at some point in the future, and if so, whose job is it to do something about it, and what could they do about it?
At this very moment, outside the church house, the manse next to Fairmount Presbyterian, I don't know of any, what I would call particularly outstanding buildings that are threatened at this moment. However, I know a lot of houses that look like they're going to fall down any moment. I'm not sure exactly, here and other places, I'm not sure exactly when there is a system in place such that meetings are required before a demolition. I don't know how that, maybe Maisie can answer this question. I don't know how that fits in with all the houses that are really in such disrepair that they really should go quickly. So I don't know how it's determined which ones will require, if you have a CLG, let's say, which ones would require, a whole public process before they're demolished. So I don't know that answer to that. Do you know the answer to that?
It just depends on your local ordinances and what you have in your laws regarding demolition. And with a CLG, I believe that is something they encourage as part of your local preservation legislation, that there is something along the lines of demolition. But I know, for example, in Lakewood, they are a certified local government. They don't have they have a slow down piece of legislation for demolition, but it is not very easy to completely stop it. But there is a system where it gets slowed down and it goes through at least a few public meetings. And the goal in Lakewood when that was put in was that through that slowdown period, it gives people an opportunity to talk with the owner of the structure and educate them and talk to them and try and come up with a plan that doesn't involve demolition. I'm sure there are other things having to do with nuisance abatement that would be a little bit unrelated, I would think, to preservation.
Well, I know, for example, there was that house at Cortland and Shaker Boulevard, Shaker Heights, that was threatened, and now they have to wait for public meetings, I believe.
But that's because of how Shaker's preservation legislation.
Yeah, but other houses in Shaker do get demolished when they're shabby and all that fairly fast.
Yeah, there's usually an exemption for homes that are considered a nuisance, that are for health and public safety.
So they're designated as such.
Yes, right.
Yes, right. So when it's inspected and it's designated that in that regard, that those can come down.
That's the difference.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and one last question that was emailed to us before we open it up to the audience. And this was a controversial topic, especially last summer, summer before that, that you saw, especially if you frequent some certain online message boards. What do you think should be done with the Cleveland Heights portion of the former Oakwood Country Club property?
Should, I could the word should.
What would you like to see happen?
At this point, I wasn't one who got so extremely excited about Oakwood as some of our local residents did. However, I think I'd like to see some kind of development with either spread out low-rise buildings for seniors, as was talked about for a long time, or actually for the whole image of the area to change to somewhat more expensive houses on winding streets that leave a lot of nature surrounding them. Kind of like to see that, but it would have to be marketed such that there would be a new appeal for that particular area, with maybe, you know, the Oakwood Country Club image in mind, and of course Oakwood Drive is there, so I think that's what I'd like to see at this point.
To me, it's an opportunity, I think, if we could get that developer interested to do something that is on the scale of, in terms of character of the architecture that was built 100 years ago in Cleveland Heights, of some really fine-looking homes. But in this case, I like to promote the concept of 300-year homes. I think we can build homes that are energy efficient and still architecturally beautiful, and take advantage of sun orientation and leaving lots of open green space. We really don't have any other opportunity in Cleveland Heights for anything like that except on that property. And I think it would just be a great example of what the next generation, the next 300-year-long houses, houses that are in the year 2100, people are looking back and saying, wow, what did they do at Oakwood? That was great. We need to landmark those properties too. So I think it's a chance for us to do something like that. I don't know how everybody else feels about it, but as an architect, I get the whole range of architectural styles in front of me, and people come to me wanting different things. And so it's everything from American Bungalow magazine to Dwell magazine. It's maybe I'm just too Cleveland Heights. When I look at Dwell magazine, I'm left with the cold stiffness of those contemporary forms, and I really would prefer to see us do something that still has some of the, what I consider more lasting traditional forms, but energy efficient, and the right orientation of windows, and the new modern systems that we have for ultra efficiency that were used on the smart home at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History a couple of years ago. Those things, I think, need to be incorporated, and they're much more suited to new construction, and we have a great opportunity there for some great next generation homes.
So yeah, I think we'll go ahead and take some questions from the audience.
You talked about local forces getting the community involved in fixing up their own homes and the excitement of that. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about the outside forces, you know, the foreclosures and the issues with the banks that are located in California, for example, like in Shaker Heights. A lot of the homes that have been demolished they're not nuisance homes, they're not zombie homes like you would find in East Cleveland, but they're often very beautiful, viable, livable homes. And the banks just don't want to deal with the properties, especially from afar. And so, you know, what does it cost to rent a Caputo? And it takes about an hour and 45 minutes to go in and demolish a house that has wrought iron fixtures all over on the inside and beautiful stonework on the front. And, you know, it's their right to go in there and demolish a house. And then it's, you know, they've got the land, and the land has value to them. And so it seems like this is an issue, all the foreclosures and the banks from afar that don't have an interest in the community. What do you feel about that? And is there anything, you know, any way to stop that process from going on?
Well, my impression is that the demolition is done by the city, it's not done by the banks. That's expensive. Nobody demolishes without thinking whether or not it's worth the 10 or 12 or 15,000.
Well, what is that process? What's the connection with foreclosures and the banks? Because I know historically a lot of homes could sit empty for a lot of time and not be demolished, but now it seems like there's a quicker turnover. So I'm just interested in what effect does that have? The bank, what you know, influence do the banks have regarding the foreclosures and that kind of thing.
Corby, I'll tell you what little I know about it. I don't know a lot about it, but I know a little bit of how the Cleveland Land Bank works. And what the Cleveland Land Bank did is they went to these Deutsche Bank and these large lending institutions that own a whole lot of properties. And they said to them, look, these people left a mortgage and it's $100,000 on this piece of property. And you've got 2,000 of them here in Cleveland. Let me give you a news flash. You're not going to get that money out of those houses. So you're going to have to do something. And we're recommending, and what they cut a deal and actually got lots of these big banks to say, we're going to make you give those properties to the Cleveland Land Bank, and we're going to make you give us $10,000 towards demolition. And lo and behold, the banks agreed to it because they didn't want that debt on their books. It was hurting them more as a banking institution to have the debt on their books than they paid off. So they wrote off all of those and they gave it to the Land Bank. Now, here's where I have a problem. I think that there's a lot of political pressure to get rid of whole neighborhoods of bad homes. I'm talking now more in the general Cleveland area than I am maybe Cleveland Heights so much. But they basically empowered, the Land Bank empowered people because they had this money they'll just say, let's tear down 20 more homes. And they saw a goal of tearing down 25,000 homes in a year just because they thought there was population that had changed. Too many of those houses are in the wrong neighborhoods, but I don't think that's the case in Cleveland Heights. I think they're in retrievable neighborhoods. And I would rather see us figure out some way to reconstruct more of those homes. The trouble is, when you reconstruct a home as an architect working with builders all the time, I know to come in and look at some of those properties, and it would take $90,000 to rehab a home like that. The trouble is they're in neighborhoods, in some cases, where the homes in those neighborhoods are selling for $30,000. And so you can't make it work financially. And that's the problem. And that's why part of my remarks in the beginning is that we can't do this piecemeal, fix a home up here and fix a home up there and try to rehab it and expect the neighborhood to tip back the other way. It's like, the finances don't work. We need to have some sort of a thing where there's some sort of a nonprofit organization, blended, part private, part public, that has an interest in how a community goes. How is it going to evolve? And maybe they can somehow, through partnering with people that live in the neighborhood, partnering with people who are landlords, and partnering with people who want to be new homeowners, well, I create a program on an entire street or a few streets to tip the balance of that entire neighborhood and give it a new sense of pride and change the character of it. I think it's going to take something on that scale in some of these neighborhoods to tip it. So it's hard to do it on a one-by-one basis.
We do have a lot of, street associations, and we have Forest Hill organization, and maybe some new organizations can be found where we have these national landmark districts. We have a Fairmont Boulevard organization. Maybe somehow or other there could be some kind of, coercion to keep up certain properties of these organizations. Also, I don't know if they still have it, but I remember many years ago the city had a representative for every neighborhood based on the school districts. I don't know if they still have that or not. You know if they still have that, Jeff?
Well, due to budget cuts, there's been some consolidation where some members of the community relations staff have two neighborhoods instead of one. But the concept is still there to have a representative for each of the major neighborhoods.
I mean, we used to go to a representative for the, many years ago, we were in the Milton neighborhood.
Right. Well, those folks are part-time employees of the city and the community relations department, and their role is to be a liaison to the folks living in those neighborhoods.
Yeah, well, a little bit like in the city of Cleveland, the council member, the council member's office in the city of Cleveland, where you go to for problems. Sure.
I think what I've always felt over the last few decades makes Cleveland Heights so special is that so many, or maybe all the streets, are composed of quite unique houses, each a work of art next to each other and very different. So you go along streets all around the neighborhood, and every one has its own character. And I've often wondered, did the architects collaborate 100 years ago? And how many different architects? Were they all built at the same time? They all had different fabrics putting them together. And I wondered, you mentioned the different organizations for some districts, but if a potential owner got to see, was given, the history of that particular street that they're interested in buying a house, when the street is thought of as what you're getting into, not simply a house, but you're part of this neighborhood, does that make you want to look after it even more and invest in it even more? I mean, we do that obviously, but maybe even more, that if we thought of ourselves as part of the streets, the individual streets. I'm sorry to go on a bit, but...
Well, I know some streets have, published a history of their street and things like that. I gave an architectural tour on Ashton Road, and they were celebrating a certain anniversary, big anniversary of their street association parties, and they came up with a detailed, history of their street, and I think there's a certain amount of, what's the word, self-consciousness, whatever. Certain streets, if you don't maintain a property, there's a certain image that people have. I can quickly answer as far as the architects we're talking about. Many of the houses in Cleveland Heights were not designed by individual architects for that site. Many of them were designed from plat books, from different national plans, nationally available plans, kit homes, and other kinds of plan books.
But you don't see that in other cities, really, the same way you do in Cleveland Heights, do you? It's there are more rows of similar houses in the streets. You don't see the uniqueness.
We don't have as much in Cleveland Heights as some city neighborhoods, some Cleveland neighborhoods, and some of the suburbs. We do have some streets like that in Cleveland Heights.
They're unique to you because you know them.
I don't think so. I think even if I were fresh, 69 when we bought our house on Meadowbrook, I mean, it just already,
Meadowbrook is the kind of
see.
street, the hills influence, the winding influence them to come up with various styles of houses and various ages, and you have like Hudson Village. I know many years ago, like back in the 70s already, Hudson Village, you could not build two houses next to each other that were the same design. They were pretty strict there. I'm talking about the newer houses, like in the 60s and 70s. Then, of course, it took over Hudson Township, so that those regulations took over a much bigger area. We didn't have anything like that in Cleveland Heights. Shaker Heights had things like that. Shaker Heights was very strict in many ways.
Maisie?
I just wanted to mention that the Cleveland Restoration Society has two programs that can be helpful to Cleveland Heights residents. The first one Ken touched on, which is the Heritage Home Loan Program, where you can get a low-interest loan through the Cleveland Restoration Society. It goes through a number of major banks in the area, but the perk, there's a flyer about it, but the big perk about it is if you get your loan through the Heritage Home Loan Program, it comes with technical advice from the people at the Cleveland Restoration Society. They'll help you identify contractors that will do appropriate work on your home and give you advice on what the right way you should go with whatever the problem is you're trying to solve. So I would recommend that. But then another thing that they provide that the city of Cleveland Heights actually pays for is a free service to I guess if the city pays for it, it's not ultimately free, but it's free to you as an individual beyond your taxes, where they will actually come and provide technical advice to you as a homeowner. You have a wall in your basement that's always seepy and wet. What do I do about it? They'll come out and talk to you about some of the options and this is what you should do. Or I'm not sure what to do with my windows. They'll come out and talk to you about windows. They'll be the ones putting on the great program coming up in a few weeks on restoring your original windows, which I highly recommend. Please don't replace them. Because you can get just as good energy efficiency if you do it the right way. But they provide all sorts of things. I used it once with a home where we were having it was a brick home, and I was having some mortar issues, and they came out and talked to me about it and gave me some guidance on who to talk to, what contractors to go to. So I recommend them as a resource, particularly since it's a free resource for Cleveland Heights residents.
The help loans that I was referring to, housing enhancement loan program, I believe.
It's different.
It's different,
Yeah.
right. You don't get that kind of preservation-related
Right.
advice. If you
That's
don't
what-
want
yes.
that,
It's
then
the
there's
Heritage
these
Home
people.
Loan is what
Yeah,
I
there
was
these
saying.
people do want.
There is a flyer, I think, that's
I think we should include with that the Heritage Home Loan Program was recently expanded so that you can actually apply for a loan to acquire a property at the same time and with the same lower rate that you're getting a loan to fix it up. So if you live in a neighborhood and there's a more than 50-year-old home that's in decline and you think you could really make something of it, you could borrow the money to buy it and to fix it up and get the expertise. And an income-producing property does qualify, so it could be something that you fix up in order to rent.
And I should point out too, thanks for saying all this stuff, Jeff, the Heritage Home Loan Program is not meant to be just for low-income people, it's for anybody. And twice I've had clients who wanted to do a project, a kitchen remodeling in both cases, and when they found out how low the interest was, they started doing more to their house beyond what they originally planned to do, which is exactly what the program was designed to do, is to get people to reinvest in their homes in Hardin County. So it really does work, and it's a great one to try. I mean, every time I do a new remodeling in Cleveland, I recommend it to people, and they always call me back and say, thanks for that. That was great, because they saved a lot of money on that home.
I think, aren't there flyers for this over on the table?
In the back corner.
So we have fewer people living here than we used to. We have these houses, some of them are in decay. I noticed on Upper Hampshire at Wilton, there was a house that was knocked down. Somebody put up a nice little park. I think it's great. Why don't we, I don't see anybody in favor of that on the piano.
I'm not really opposed to that at all. I mean, I think that I live on Compton, and further south on Compton, there were a couple of houses demolished that were in pretty bad shape. And they've got nice green space there now. The people who seem to be taking care of it really well. I think it's a nice thing. I mean, we have to recognize the fact that we have a shrinking population. Whatever houses remain, though, I'd like to see them taken care of. So I guess that's where I'm coming from. I know we can't save every one, but if we don't try, we're going to even more.
The city took that over and did that.
Actually, it was the neighbors that did
Was
that.
it the neighbor?
The city did help to a substantial extent. They spent quite a bit of money to repair the sidewalk. They provided mulch and saplings. But in the neighborhood, there was a strong coming together of folks who wanted to turn it into a nice green space. Not a park, but just a green space with a path and benches and permaculture gardening. And it was pretty inspiring, and it's something that I hope becomes more of an example, because I agree with Stuart. Well, why don't we do that in other places so that lots that are kind of scary, trash-filled spaces can become attractive?
I think they did that around, not Englewood, one of the Cambridge, one of those streets, Cambridge, I think they did that on a corner, and on a street, on a corner like that, if you have a neighborhood like Hampshire and Wilton, I could see a lot of people there wanting to maintain something like that, and it's sort of a nature-conscious neighborhood, and it's on a corner, it looks all right. The house was vacant for a long, long time. I'd still like to see that house there, but anyway. It's kind of a turn-of-the-century type tower. In some neighborhoods, Compton, there are a lot of larger lots and all that, but in many neighborhoods, when they came out in Shaker Heights, the government had said they'd like to see more vacant lots and neighbors taking them over and all that. I just feel that in certain neighborhoods, I really don't want to see that, because it looks like missing teeth. You'll see 20 houses in a row, and there's the vacant lot in the middle of the block. And you wonder what happened there. It's like a negative image. Some streets like DeSoto, I mean, certain streets have many of those now.
DeSoto has a dozen.
Yeah, and it just really looks bad for the neighborhood, I think. Almost like security doors all over the place.
It looks worse in the middle of the street than it does.
Yeah. And you know something was there, and what happened? Was it a fire? Was it a tragedy? What was it? a negative image to me. And then also, of course, you don't get the same taxes from it. And some of the houses really would, a new house would enhance the street, you know, when it's a certain kind of design. So I don't know. In most cases, I don't think I'd want to see it.
The other thing I would say is if we could get people to build on some of those corner lots even that are left, I think that that's an opportunity to kind of set the tone for the street. If you can do something that kind of introduces a new building that's compatible with the street, but if it's bright and spanking new and looks like it fits that character of the street, I think it's a great opportunity to kind of inspire the other homes that are on the street to be kept up and increase their values.
All right, we have time for maybe one or two more questions. How about Deanna?
This is really more of a comment, but building off of what we've talked about recently, Future Heights, an organization that I work for, has worked with a number of neighborhood groups, such as the group that's creating Spirit Corner and the Montford Community Garden to create something on a vacant lot. We are also working on the 12th National Register Historic District together with the Forest Hill Homeowners Association, which would like to put the entire Forest Hill neighborhood on the National Register of Historic Places. Currently, the Rockefeller portion of it is listed, and they would like to see the entire neighborhood. Many of the homes were built in the 50s and 60s, but they are now eligible. And so we're looking for volunteers, and we will eventually be looking for financial resources as well to happen. So if anyone's interested, let me know.
How about all the way to that corner?
Yeah, I'm new in the area, and when I see house listings, you know, my first thought is, wow, some of these amazing looking houses are really affordable. And then I see the number for property taxes, and it seems pretty high relative to the sale price, to the list price. Do you think the use of tax abatements as an incentive for home repair and remodeling would be effective?
I get the whole idea of high taxes, and all of us homeowners deal with it. I think it's a very difficult question when it comes to what we do with schools. We're taking it away from schools, and we have a struggle with our rebuilding of our school district right now too. So
It's not a struggle, it's an exciting. We are happy and optimistic about
They give it to
it.
rebuilding.
Right.
Could we turn that into a question for the audience and have like a show of hands? How many people would like to see a tax abatement for people who are willing to buy a home and fix it up, or an existing home they already own and fix it up so that the tax would be abated on the improvement and then was an increase in value? How many people would like to see that?
makes sense.
You know, there was a comment before about our city council, and they don't actually arrive like Mary Poppins on the wind. They tend to get voted into office, as I've had occasion to learn. And votes are about support, and issues like historic preservation are part of that. And unfortunately, part of political support is a result of misunderstanding or of thinking you know something and it turns out not to be true. So public education is important to marshaling support to get people into office to actually serve what people want. So in our community, are we a community with a rich historical heritage? Yes, you say yes. Are we a community that cares about it? Yes. I mean, we're a community where you walk down Scarborough and see the Steamboat House, whatever it's really called. You know, you love it and you want it to stay there. Are we a community that is aware that anybody could buy any historic structure in town and tear it down? No, I don't think people know that. I think they assume that somebody would at least slow it down, that there'd be a process. So if we educate people on that, that might become more of an element in what they think about when they choose their leaders on a body like City Council that would make the decision on whether we should be something like a CLG.
What was your question about tax abatement on improvements to the property? Is that what you were asking, Jeff?
Is that what you meant?
No, Jeff, what did you ask?
Well,
What was your question about?
the thought has been raised about having a tax abatement scheme that would abate the property taxes that result from improving your
That's what it
house.
does. Okay.
So that you would have some period of not paying taxes based on how much you've improved the value by fixing it up.
I didn't understand.
Well, that would be a question. And there's also the thought of, well, if we have a lot of houses standing vacant, should there be an abatement for buying those and fixing them up? So,
Well,
they're-
at
they're
the
just-
city council meeting, when there was so much talk about tax abatement about a month and a half ago, you know, with the overlook Edgehill property, a lot of people did bring up, you should go to other neighborhoods. And I guess they had that kind of thing in mind. I mean, I didn't know what they meant, but I guess that's what they meant.
Right.
How good to materialize that.
Right.
Just don't take it away from the schools?
All right, I think we have time for one last question. Yes.
One thing, what can we do to get city council to approve some kind of historic preservation for beautiful buildings that are being torn down? We all have tried and tried and tried, what can we do to save the houses? I'm Fairmont Presbyterian member, and I think we're all going to stand in front of the bulldozer. But I think, why can't we do that? Are we too nice?
Well,
To find people?
I think it does take a lot of one-on-one with members of council. Jeff will advise you how we do it. It's just a matter of, I think you need to talk to them individually, not collectively, and see what is their
I'm not the only
resistance.
person that feels this way.
See what their resistance may be.
You know, I just hate to see that. I'm fortunate to live on a street where 3 of the houses that were owned by elderly people who have now died, that was a total disrepair, are all bought and just sold and being restored. And I'm so grateful. And, you know, we're all from 1915, 1920. I'm so grateful. And I look at streets where you don't have that, I just feel so lucky.
Well, you do. You happen to be lucky. You live in a district where
Yeah.
the
But people are
predominant
moving in,
neighborhood is
buying
very
them,
good.
restoring them. It's
I am seeing more changed windows on Fairmount, however. My favorite house on Fairmount, they changed the windows and they are not right. It's subtle.
All right, so I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, but great questions with a very knowledgeable audience. So thank you guys, and thank you for